So thanks for joining us. And Ronak, if you want to take it away.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. As Julie said, I'm Ronak, and I'm going to share some of my experiences. I'm going to try to share my screen first before I can share anything else. So hold on a second. Let's see if I can get this to work. Is that working? Yep. Okay, great.
Yes.
Let me go into a presenter mode here. All right. Let me just check one more time. Is it in full screen for everyone?
Yep.
Good. I see some nodding heads. Great. So I'm gonna spend a few minutes talking about building an investor pitch deck. And before I get into that, I'll just give a little bit of background on myself and kind of give you an idea of what I've been up to. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I've spent, as Julie said, I've spent the last 20 years in venture-backed data and technology companies. And it was all by accident. This wasn't a well thought out or planned thing. In 2001, I met this guy who was speaking. I was finishing up my degree at Northwestern, and he was talking about data and how it was going to change the world, and specifically how it was going to change manufacturing environments. And I was really drawn to the story, and I asked him for a job, and he agreed to hire me. And I didn't realize it was just a couple of guys working in an incubator at the time, but I think I was getting paid like $8 an hour, and ignorance is bliss. So I jumped in and said yes, and it was a 5.5-year ride, and learned a ton and had a great experience, and never really left the startup world. Did a few other things, and then I should say I'm a St. Louis kid, so I was in Chicago for school, and I stayed up there for about 10 years, but I finally got back in 2008 and joined a local company here in St. Louis that some of you may know, Ansira, which was formerly called NSI Marketing Services, and they were kind of service focused, but trying to be more of a technology company, and spent 3.5 years there. Got my MBA at WashU, and then started my own company for a couple of years doing consulting and kind of data technology work. And then in 2012, met these 3 other guys who had this dream to build a data company around transparency, kind of food and beverage and personal care products, and bringing better data to ultimately to consumers to make better informed decisions. And they asked me if I would join as the 4th co-founder, and fell in love with the guys and fell in love with the idea, and jumped into that in 2012, which was originally called Food Essentials, which we rebranded to LabelInsights. And from 2012 to 2020, I ran product, then ran sales, and then ran the company as CEO. And then in 2020, kind of moved out of that role and had stayed on the board since then. And I'll talk more about our fundraising journey at LabelInsights. And over the last 1.5 years or so, I've been serving on a bunch of boards as an independent board director and doing advisory work for startups, both in St. Louis and around the country, and also doing some other, nonprofit work here in St. Louis, and also doing some work with WashU as an entrepreneur in residence there. And of course, as Julie said, I'm the entrepreneur in residence at Arch Grants, which is really exciting. And that's been kind of a full circle journey for me. I'm going to advance here and kind of talk about this together. But in 2012, at LabelInsights, when we were really just getting started, we learned about Arch Grants, and we applied, and we won a $50,000 grant, which at the time we didn't realize kind of the impact that would have on our trajectory, but it was really this huge catalyst for our growth. And not only did kind of getting into the Arch Grants community and the St. Louis community help us raise our next round of financing, as you can see here, in 2013 with Cultivation Capital, but it just got us really plugged into the St. Louis ecosystem. And anyone who knows St. Louis well knows this is like this small big town, right? So got us connected to the right people, and we went on and eventually closed a deal with Schnucks and other really kind of St. Louis goodness, if you will. And when we look back on our journey to 2012, which was seems like a million years ago, we still think about the impact that Arch Grants had on our business, which was wonderful. And we were fortunate enough to also get a follow on grant from Arch Grants for $100,000. So we got a total of $150,000 from Arch Grants, which was just great. And so earlier I said it's kind of full circle. Now as an entrepreneur in residence with Arch Grants is great because it's an opportunity to spend time with the Arch Grants team, and most importantly with Arch Grants founders, helping them with their challenges and kind of sharing my experiences and perspective on the different things that they're dealing with. And obviously for this, we're going to talk a little bit more about fundraising, and I'll get into some of the pitch deck stuff in a few minutes. But since this talk is about pitch decks and fundraising, I thought I would at least show our fundraising cycle here, where we raised I don't know, a total of about $40 million in capital over a bunch of rounds. And just one of the things to point out here, and we won't have time to go into all of this today, but these are kind of some of the topics I talk about as an EIR with Arch Grants. But we, over our LabelInsight fundraising journey, we raised, we had grant money like Arch Grants. We had institutional capital. Majority of the fundraising here was from institutional VCs and growth equity firms. We also had a customer invest. So under the 2017 column, you can see Topco at the very bottom. Topco is a co-op in the grocery retail industry. They were one of our biggest customers, and they invested in the business. And we also did debt financing, which is indicated here by bridge financing, which was convertible debt. So, fundraising, as some of you may know, takes many different forms, and we kind of experienced, most of them, probably not all of them, but most of them. And that's kind of okay. And that's pretty common in a typical startup journey. It's definitely not a one size fits all when it comes to fundraising, and depending on what you're trying to accomplish and how much capital you're trying to raise, there's a lot of different ways to accomplish that. So don't just think it has to be, a venture route, for example. So I just want to talk for a couple of minutes about some of the things that we do in the EIR program with Arch Grants, which is a pretty new program as of last year. And it's been great, sort of selfishly. It's given me a lot of energy, and it keeps me connected to all these great ideas in St. Louis. So I absolutely love it. And but hopefully the founders are also getting value out of it. And one of the things that we've done is we've started this founder series, which is an ongoing series of webinars and discussion topics. And these are some of the different workshops and webinars that we've held over the last 12 months. So we've done kind of a deep dive into investor and fundraising, so much deeper than what we'll have time for today, but like, an hour and a half on hearing pitches from different founders and kind of giving feedback and dissecting them and talking about how they might be able to improve them. So we've done work on that. We've done sales workshops, which is kind of how to communicate and articulate the value of your business. And when you're trying to sell something, right? Very, very important. More important than raising money, by the way, is selling and getting customers. We've done a webinar on SaaS contracts, so that's software as a service contracting, and best practices and tips around how to write a contract and what terms to watch out for. That's something that people who are kind of early in their maturity curve around entrepreneurship and startups can have a lot of challenges or anxiety around how do I do a contract and what's good and what's not good. So we spent time on that. We've talked about cap tables, and a cap table, for anyone that may not know, is your capitalization structure that outlines kind of who owns what in terms of equity and the shares and the dollars invested, et cetera. So we spent time talking about cap tables and how they work and how they evolve over time. And somewhat similar but different is we've spent time on board management of, when do you have a board and how does your board get created and what are the different roles and responsibilities. And as part of this, which I didn't list here, is we've talked about in these webinars and workshops about founder control and kind of how to maintain control of your business as you raise capital and as you go forward, which is, again, another important kind of consideration as you're building a company. And then we've had a session just called Ask Me Anything, which is exactly that. People just ask me questions, and I do my best to give them, good answers. So that's kind of what we've done in the Founder Series topics, and we'll continue to do these and continue to add other topics as people request. There's an opportunity for anyone who's in the Arch Grants family to request topics that they are challenged with or that they want to learn about, and then we'll put together a workshop or a webinar on it. So those are kind of the one-to-many in terms of, I'm educating or the group on. And then I also spent a lot of time in the EIR program, one-to-one, kind of founder coaching and mentoring on either going deeper or obviously being more specific to an individual company. So, if someone's getting ready for a pitch, to practice their pitch, or if they're trying to get networked with certain investors, or thinking about how to go to market and how to acquire customers. If they actually have a term sheet, right, that they're trying to negotiate, I've spent time with the founders helping them understand how to negotiate it, and maybe some terms to help them understand some of the terms that they may not be familiar with. There's been some instances where I'm helping with specific employee-related challenges, or people hiring their first employee, for example, and trying to figure out how does that work, which can really feel daunting. And then some of this other stuff around pitching, your sales presentation, and helping them around think about how to set up a board and how to set up an advisory board, and kind of how to issue options, right? So how to use stock options and understanding stock option plans. So pretty much anything you can think of related to building a company, we will either create kind of a workshop or a webinar in the series, and or spend one-on-one time with the founders. And different companies use this in different ways. Some use it quite a bit because they just reach out and say, hey, I want to talk about this topic, and others just use it more periodically, and that's fine. It's kind of ultimately up to each founder and each company. So that's kind of a little bit about how I help as an EIR. I wanted to spend a few minutes on building an investor pitch deck. There's, I think, 4 or 5 slides here, and then I'll open it up for questions. So just given time, I'm not going to be able to go super deep into this and give you kind of a whole bunch of examples. But what I try to do is put together a little bit of a guide on how I think about fundraising and how I think about pitch decks. And I should preface this is one person's opinion. I have a fair amount of experience on this, but you don't have to listen to me as the law, but try to take pieces of this and see how you can apply it. So kind of my take on investor pitches are, one, it is storytelling, but it's one that's grounded in data, right? So it's not just like arm waving and telling a great story that sounds good, but that you can't defend in any way. And so, and I'm a data oriented person, so I always use data, both backwards looking of what have I done in terms of if I'm doing a pitch, or for you, if you're doing a pitch, what have you done? What have you accomplished? Do you have customers? Do you have a product? Are people paying you? That kind of stuff, as well as what can you go do in the future if you raise capital? I mean, that's really kind of what the story needs to be around. And I think there are 3 core elements of a great pitch. And I would go as far to say I think there are only 3 core elements of a great pitch. One is, what's the market problem and why does it need to be solved now? And you see, I bolded now because I think this is one of the most overlooked things when people are starting businesses or pitching. There are a lot of problems that can be solved. There's a lot of ways to solve them, but the market needs to feel that it has to be solved now, or your customers need to feel that it needs to be solved now, or it's going to be difficult for you to have a really successful business. Because otherwise you're fighting against people that just accept the status quo and pick something else as a priority, and it's not going to be what you want them to spend time on. So when I'm listening to pitches, I always try to understand, yes, the problem, but why does it have to be solved now? So I'd encourage you to really make sure you nail that in your pitch. The second thing is, why you, right? How are you best positioned to solve that problem? So this is, why are you unique? And what's the proof that you can actually execute against it? Right? So do you have customers? Are you getting paid? Do you have any sort of ROI? The ROI is kind of the holy grail, in my opinion, of if you can actually tell an investor that when someone buys our product or service for $100,000, that they make $1 million or they save $1 million, then you're really onto something. Not only from a fundraising perspective, but from a sales perspective, you'll be able to sell a lot because you have an ROI story. So that's kind of the second element. And the third element is, what do you need to succeed? So this is your ask. This is your financial ask when you're fundraising. And what does success look like? Now, size of prize is not your what I'm sure you've all seen, not your slide with the big circle on it that says the market opportunity is $50 billion. Okay. Don't do that. Because that's not telling anyone anything. All that's telling someone is that you're good at using Google and you can look up like the size of a market. The thing that you really want to talk about here is if I raise $1 million, which is the ask, I can grow a business in the next 12 months or 18 months that looks like this. And here's how I will do that in terms of here's how I'll invest my dollars to do that. And then if I can keep going, this is how much of the market I can capture. So you have to have an awareness of how big the market is. But like, I really don't like pitches that are, I need $1 million and the market's 50 billion. Like you miss the whole middle, which is like how you're going to capture the market. So really spend time on that. So that's kind of it. I think those are the 3 core elements. A sample deck flow, and you can, if you Google this, you'll get 50 different people's opinions on what a deck should look like, but this is my take. It's short, it's, to the point, and it's hitting these things that I just talked about. What's the problem? What's your solution? Why is it unique? Do you have customers? Do you have sales? Do you have an ROI? And then what do you need to succeed? And what does success look like? That's the pitch. Everything else, I think, may be extraneous and kind of takes away from focusing on this, which is what an investor really wants. So this is kind of my recommendations on what you should do more of and what you should do less of. So the do's and don'ts. Stuff you should do more of is you should be succinct. If you're using 3 to 5 slides to explain something, find a way to do it in 1. Okay, less is more in an investor pitch, especially in the first or second conversation. You got to be clear on the problem, why it has to be solved now. Give them an opportunity to ask questions and engage in dialogue. This seems easy, but it's hard to do. I've heard so many pitches where I get on a 30-minute pitch and the founder talks for literally 30 minutes straight. I have no opportunity to ask questions, and then the call ends, right? That is not a good pitch. A good pitch on a 30-minute call is you're talking for maybe 10 minutes, and then you have 20 minutes of engaging dialogue. So make sure you engage them. Use numbers, use dollars, use stats and percentages wherever possible to show the impact and the cost. So for example, when you think about a problem, don't just present the problem, talk about what is the cost of doing nothing. So here's the problem, here's what it's costing people. And if they don't change, this is kind of the penalty, right? And that creates the urgency. And when we solve the problem with our unique solution, this is what's gained. This is the money that's gained, right? Or the costs that are avoided. So put it in real numbers. And if you can if you have a product that is demoable, demo it because it brings it to life. The stuff you should do less of is you should not try to educate the investor on your last 5 to 10 years of your experiences. No offense, they don't care, right? You care, they don't care. They just want to know how they can invest and how you're going to make them a lot of money. Investors are pretty simple. They want to invest and make money. That's it, right? So that's what you want to tell them. Don't try to give them a deep dive into your business during the first pitch. You'll be distracting them from getting clarity on if they should want to invest or not. Don't try to answer every question you could ever imagine, right? This is a pitfall. You think you need to tell them every single thing about your business and make them an expert. You don't need to do that. Again, they just want to know why they should invest and how they can make money. And they make money by you making money. You build a business, they invest, they make money. Don't have a long deck. Don't use lots of words. Slides are distracting. So when you build a slide, you should always think about what's on that slide and know that the person looking at the slide is going to look at the slide and not listen to you. So you should put less on your slides. If you have text on your slides and you're trying to talk, they're not listening to you. They're reading your text on your slide. So short, don't have a long deck. Don't use lots of words. Use pictures, use graphics, right? And keep it short. Don't go into a deep dive on financials. I've heard pitches where in the pitch, there's 25 slides, which is too many, and then 10 slides are on financials. Not on a first pitch, right? You don't want to do that. This is a strategic pitch on getting someone convinced that they should partner with you, not the deep dive into financials. Fundraising is a process. There's a whole bunch of different milestones you're going to hit. So you're not trying to give them everything up front. It's almost a teaser. You're just trying to get them to the next step, right? And so you don't need to go into this much detail at the beginning. I think this is my last slide before questions. So these are some additional best practices. One is, and based on my learnings, right? One is team matters at LabelInsight. I was fortunate to be one of 4 co-founders, which was a wonderful thing. Because we had 4 people that passionately cared about the business and that could do the heavy lifting. And we had each other's backs, and that there's no feeling better than that. There's no feeling better than working with people that you would do anything for and with. And so there are lots of people that are solo founders. I give them major props and kudos because it's so hard, but team matters. And so if you can have co-founders, do it, and really be thoughtful around the people you surround yourself with, because that is really the ultimate make or break for a business at any size, at any scale. Always be prepared. You hear about elevator pitches, it's real. I can't even tell you how many times I've been asked to give a pitch when I didn't know I was going to give a pitch, with no visuals, with no prep. Sometimes it was actually in an elevator. Sometimes it was at a conference, all sorts of random things. I remember walking into a Starbucks once to get a coffee, and I knew someone who was there, and they were meeting with an investor, and they said, "Hey, Ronak, you should meet so-and-so." And he said, "Hey, nice to meet you. Give me your pitch." I wasn't prepared, by the way. It didn't go so well. So be prepared, right? It's not hard if you can spend time on it, and just know how to articulate, here's the problem, here's the quantification of that problem, here's what we're doing to solve it, here's why it needs to be done now, here's our customers, and here's sort of the return on investment that our customers get. That's it. And if you're fundraising, we're fundraising $5 million or 500,000 or whatever, right? So it doesn't need to be overly thought out, but you just need to be ready. Valuation isn't everything. We as founders get so hung up on valuation. It's really not the paramount issue here. There are so many other issues that are important: board structure, blocking rights, voting rights, cap tables, preference stacks, a bunch of things that we do deep dives on, in the EIR program. I can't get into all that here, but this is a topic I'm passionate about talking about, which is around valuation versus all these other things you should also be worried about. Fundraising and corporate development go hand in hand. So when you're fundraising, you should always be talking to companies that might be able to buy you, because they may be able to invest or they may buy you. And earlier I said, like, one of our biggest customers invested in our business, so that's kind of a form of corporate development. So when you fundraise, don't only talk to financial fundraisers, talk to companies that may fundraise or be interested in buying you. That's usually a good time to exit. This second to last bullet is the most important bullet in the whole slide. Don't forget the business. The biggest trap you fall in when you're fundraising is you get focused on fundraising and you lose sight of the business. You will fail if that happens, and you will lose time that you can never make up. The best way to fundraise is to focus on the business. When your business is doing well, fundraising is easy. When your business isn't doing well, fundraising is very painful. And the last point, which is the dirty little secret, at least for me, is it only gets harder. As you raise money, as you get bigger, the stakes go up, the complexity of the business goes up, and fundraising also gets more difficult. And so it's sort of like leveling up in a video game. You level up, and then there's new challenges, and it's hard to achieve them, but it's worth it. And that's it. You should apply for an arts grant, because it could change your life. It certainly did for me. I don't know where we'd be without the arts grant in terms of LabelInsight, and we went on to build a successful company and employ 300 to 400 people over the last 9 years in St. Louis and Chicago, and it's just been a great thing for us. So I hope that each of you can also find a way to be on that journey. So with that, I don't know how I did on time, but if we have time, I can open it up for some questions. Do we have time?
Yep, definitely.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So let me get off screen share here so I can see you guys again. There we go. And see if anyone has questions.
Hey, I have a question. This is Amber. So my question regarding the financial slides. So what's your recommendation in terms of like how many slides is like preferred to show the financial information, and what kind of information you definitely want to see in your slide?
Yeah, so I would show one slide on financials, and I would make it a combination of your historical financials. So if you have historical financials, right, I would show that so so an investor can see kind of your growth curve, your growth trajectory, and then your forward-looking financials. And one of the things I used to do, and I still do, that I didn't really see other people do, so maybe it's a dumb idea, okay, but I used to show my financials without investment and with investment. And I really like this, and I think it worked. And so I would kind of show them like, hey, if I don't raise, this is what my business looks like. But if I do raise, here's what my business looks like. And it's different. And so that is the reason I did that, is it's a way to get investors excited. But it's also a subtle way to tell investors, I don't need your money, right? Like, hey, I'm fine. We're going to grow a business. We're going to continue to grow. But with investment, we're a rocket ship. So that's how I show that. And you can accomplish that on one slide. But be careful, because when you put a lot of content on one slide, you got to be clever with your graphics, because otherwise it becomes overwhelming and then you kind of lose the point. So that's what I would do. And I wouldn't focus at all on cost or any of that stuff. That doesn't need to be in an investor deck.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else have questions? Oh, there's a couple of people who raised their hands. You guys can just jump in.
Hey, Ronak. Hey, so thank you so much. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, crystal clear.
So firstly, maybe I missed it. Was this an overall for just general asking for money, or was this focused towards angels, VCs, or?
Yeah, so I think it applies to all. It applies to anyone. I mean, my background, most of my fundraising has been with venture capitalists and a little bit of growth equity, and now some private equity. And it applies to all of them. I think it also applies with angels. I mean, you can be a little bit more informal with angels, but I think it's the same.
Fantastic. So with that, a lot of I've seen, and it wasn't in your second slide, and just wanted to ask, I've got a general sense that your team really seems to be important in that deck, but you didn't cover that. Is that because you find that that's not necessary as much, or it's just kind of depending on the group? Funny, I'm actually on the East Coast, and I get a different vibe sometimes from the West Coast.
Yeah, I think it's a good call out. So thanks for that. Team, I said at the end, right? Team matters. I talked about that quite a bit. And we would highlight our team. But we would highlight our team in service of sort of explaining why we're unique. And so it's kind of embedded within that. How are we solving the problem and why are we unique? And so that could be a combination of this is the technology or the data or the solution, and this is our team, and this is our areas of expertise. So I definitely think you want to highlight your team. And that's typically where I would do it. Some people do it at the end, which is also fine, but I like to bring it earlier and more front and center.
I can't agree more. And it's funny that a template always seems to be that second to last slide, and I believe it should be the second slide. But
yeah, again, it should be early.
So multiple questions, but I'll just leave one so the group can. The grant that you mentioned, is that for just the local area, or is that for a national?
I'll let Julie answer that.
Okay, and then I'll come back for more questions if there's time. So thank you.
Yes, it's national, so it's open to anyone in St. Louis, across the country, and across the world. So normally we fund 50% of our cohort from St. Louis and 50% from outside St. Louis.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julie.
Hey, Ron, here's Charles, and I have a question. So you're talking about team, just, the previous questions to continue. Like me, start a company, with my wife, kind of family business. So that could be a kind of challenge for the investors for the family business. What do you think?
Well, so I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if your question is because it's a husband, wife, or spouse. Do investors not like that, or is it because you're trying to build a lifestyle business and investors don't like that, or are you trying to build a big business?
Yeah, we definitely want to be bigger, big business, right?
Yeah.
But
Okay.
you know, like you just you know, in your presentation, you're talking about co-founders have 4 different peoples. That definitely probably is good for investor to look at it. We have innovation, but we are running a family business. We
Yep.
could grow exponentially. That's why I'm interested in investment.
Yeah. Look, it's an interesting question. I don't think investors are turned off by that. At least in my experience. Now, I didn't start a business with my spouse, but I don't think investors are turned off by that. I know actually a company I'm thinking of that's an Arch Grant portfolio company that's a husband wife, and they're absolutely crushing it. So I think it's an advantage, if anything. And at the end of the day, the investor is just going to look at if you're both talented and what are you bringing to the business, and is the business viable, and can you articulate all those points that I made. So I wouldn't lose any sleep over that. I would just go after it just as if you're 2 people, you're 2 co-founders working in the business. And so I don't know, but if you're running in, we may not have time here, but I'd be curious if you are running into roadblocks on that. I'd be curious to understand why, but I wouldn't anticipate that you would.
Great, thanks so much. So my second question, same as the previous to Junior. So is the Arch Grant has say limitation for the startup? Say we already kind of small business survived last 7-8 years already. We have revenue, and is this a cap? Say you only fund say on the 100K or something company or something.
So there's no revenue
limitation.
Right. So there's no revenue requirements. And the stage as a company is validated idea. So develop an MVP up through like a pre-series A stage.
Okay, thanks so much. And give for other people's question.
Great.
I had a quick question. Thank you so much for coming to speak this afternoon. What advice do you have for creating a pitch deck for a podcast? Like, how can you make that compelling? Because usually podcasts like support a primary business, but I'm in the process of like applying for some grants, and I have a podcast, which is a business. So I was just wondering like what advice you might have.
It's funny. So one of the companies I'm on the board of and pretty active with is a company called Ringr, Ringr. You should look them up. We don't do podcasts. We're a podcast technology company. We're a platform. So anyways, maybe we can connect separately and talk about that. But good question. I've never been asked this question, so I don't have like the scripted answer. You should do your pitch as a podcast, and then make people listen to your pitch like that way versus giving them slides. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but I think it's interesting. You're like delivering an investor pitch podcast about a podcast company. I would listen to it. And you would stand out. Now, the problem is investors like to see slides. So you may need to like have slides, right? But that's how I would do it. But then in terms of actually making an investor pitch, I don't think it would be all that different, right? I mean, you're just having to be a podcast. And so you just need to talk about what's the need that you're fulfilling, and how are you doing it, and what's the opportunity, and how you're going to make money, and how you're going to get listeners, right? Subscribers. So I think it's all the same as many other businesses.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the thing I'm applying for requires a pitch deck, and I'd never created one before, so I was just curious, like if there's something in particular that needs to be done specifically if you're making a pitch deck for a podcast, or if there was anything unique about that, because I think it's a bit more challenging when there's so many podcasts out there, and it's not necessarily like a specific product. I'm not sure. That's very helpful.
Yeah. I think you got to follow the normal flow, but you should try to find a way to differentiate. There's some comments in the chat. Maybe you can take a look at as well. It sounds like there's another company that actually did this. So you should go figure out what they did. And if they were successful, you should just copy what they did.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I had one quick question. In terms of, I know you mentioned not going into too much detail and things like that, but do you still recommend having an appendix at the end that like maybe you would reference back in that question period when you're leaving, plenty of time to go through the back and forth with the group that you're pitching?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this because like I used to do this all the time. I used to have like, by the way, the first pitch deck we had at LabelInsights was over 100 slides. Okay, so it's pretty funny now, I know. We still didn't get laughed out of the room, but we should have. We used to have like all these slides and then this appendix and like, the thing is like, a pitch is not a choose your own adventure. Okay, it's not that. So a pitch is you telling the investor why they should invest in your business, and you need to be prepared to answer the question, no doubt. But it also depends on time. Like your initial pitch might be 30 minutes if you're lucky. You're probably not going to have an hour. So you need to really tailor the message down to that, and you want enough time for discussion. When you get into diligence, yeah, you're going to have like hundreds of slides and documents and all kinds of stuff. And, people are going to spend hours looking at a data room and studying your materials and doing Q&A. So you do need all that stuff. But I'm a firm believer that you don't need that stuff in the early kind of third of your investment timeline. So resist the urge. That urge is part on that list where I said, do less of. It's like trying to make them an expert. Don't make them an expert. The other thing that I didn't have on the list is, there's a trap that people fall into when an investor asks a question and then you talk for like 20 minutes and you try to explain everything. If they ask a question, listen to the question they asked, only answer that question and then stop talking. It's very hard to do. I mean, this is a skill, it's very hard to master, but if you're practicing and training, that's what you sort of got to train. They're asking that question for a reason. They're not asking you to answer 10 other questions, right? So really pay attention to that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more.
Okay, last question.
If I can jump in on this one, I wanted to ask more about, I have the presentation ready, I've practiced all this time. Any advice on the actual pitching part of it? I'm there standing and now talking.
You mean the actual the actual pitch,
yeah, the actual.
What do you mean? Like how you should dress and stuff like that?
I guess like what energy do I have to bring to that moment? Yeah.
Okay. Good one. So, right or wrong, investors do want passionate founders, right? I mean, you're all passionate if you're doing a business, like you're doing it, because you care about it, because you believe in it. But everyone's got a different personality. So I'd say number one, don't try to be someone that you're not, because you'll probably fail. Be you. And so be comfortable, but bring energy to the extent, that can be natural for you, and, and make it fun. And that's important. Like investors like that. They, just like they're people, just like us, right? I mean, yeah, they're looking for a return on their investment first and foremost, but they want to be around good people, fun people, energetic people that care a lot about what they're doing. And so that's got to come through in the pitch. All right, Julie, I'll hand it off to you.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, can you guys see that? Awesome. Okay. So my name is Julie Maurer. I am the competition manager at ArchGrants. Thanks everybody for joining. Today actually is the first day that applications are open for the startup competition. So about ArchGrants, we're a nonprofit economic development organization helping to build a new economy here in St. Louis. We were started in 2012, the year that Ronak's startup received the grant, and we funded 173 companies in, I think, over 30 industries now. So the mission of ArchGrants, we're building a dynamic nesting environment in St. Louis to help startups grow and develop. And we partner with accelerators, universities, support organizations, incubators, and just everybody in the community to help these founders build their business. So I'm here to talk about the startup competition that is open for applications today through the end of the month. So every single year, we award innovative, scalable, job-creating startups with $50,000 grants. And this access to an ecosystem of resources in exchange for headquartering your business here for 1 year. So I talked a little bit about the stages earlier of who should apply. So that validated idea through seed stage, pre-series A stage, industry. So all industries must be tech-enabled product services, and really a scalable business model that can have a national, international impact. And then diverse founding teams that want to give back to the St. Louis startup community and really be involved in the ecosystem. So you get $50,000 non-dilutive funding. And if you're locating from outside Missouri, you get a $10,000 relocation stipend. This network that we've built for the startups, professional support, business development, fundraising. And then our EIR, who is presently Ronak, with tons of experience and is there to help you with your business. And then after your year is over, you are eligible to apply for $100,000, for up to $100,000 of additional equity-free follow-on funding. And that was I was talking about, the Growth Grants program. So this program was created to help support our companies ongoing, and it must be matched by equity investment, convertible debt, or grant funding. Here's our timeline. So applications open today. They close at the end of the month. I encourage you to jump into the SurveyMonkey portal, look over the application, read through it, and really get to know it. You can log in, you can work on it, you can save it, you can log out, and it'll all be in there. And then we have a few rounds of judging throughout the course of the summer, and then we have our live pitch day in July, where we invite about 40 to 50 companies to live pitch in front of judges, and then we select our awardees, and the program will start in October. So here is how the preliminary judges will evaluate your application once you submit. So the unique and innovative company, you have to make that, make it known how you're going to scale. How are you going to create jobs? How are you going to generate revenue? The ability to execute on the next stage of your business, those contributions to the St. Louis ecosystem, how do you want to get involved? And really the meaningfulness of that grant and why St. Louis is a good place to build your business. I wanted to include a little bit about Geospatial here. We, a couple of years ago, announced that we were going to start funding geospatial companies. This past year, we funded 5 companies in the geospatial space. And these are some loose qualifications on the application. It goes more in depth. And you can select if your company uses AI, machine learning, GPS, things like that. So I always like to mention too, one of those program perks of the Geospatial grant is that you receive a free co-working membership to the to Geosaurus at T-Rex, which is the Geospatial Innovation Center, which is actually very, very cool. So here's this part of the program and what we offer, and Ronak talked a little bit about this too. It's really a concierge style program, and we just help make connections for you. So this is the requirement: locating your business here in St. Louis, specifically 51% of your founding team or one founder, and 51% of the team needs to reside in St. Louis for that year program. So here's other ways to get involved. If you are interested in helping startups, we have an angel vendor partnership program. If you're interested in being a preliminary judge, we always need judges that have expertise in all the different fields. And then obviously donating to help us sustain and keep on funding awesome startups.
Other than that, I wanted to thank everyone for coming to our session today. We really appreciated you guys asked really good questions. if there's nothing else, have a great rest of your night. And yeah, thank you guys.